This meeting of the Wyndham Southeast School District Board to order at 7:07. Our first order of business tonight will be to nominate a board chair. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate David Scholes for board chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
David Scholes for board chair.
Second?
I'll second that.
Any other nominations?
I nominate Christine Naylor.
Second?
Seconded.
Any other nominations? Okay,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I nominate Ann.
Second?
I'll second.
Ann Beekman. Any other nominations? Okay.
Question, roll call question.
Mhm.
Do you get to vote as a voting member? Do you get to vote for every candidate, or do you only get to cast one vote?
That is a really good question, and my assumption is you get to cast one vote. Does anyone have any different? Christina, you know Robert's rules pretty well.
We've never had this come up.
Nope, we never have.
Is a majority required to be elected?
I would assume, yes.
Okay, so we may have to vote more than once.
Shall we vote and see what happens and come back to it if we need to?
Is there
Yes.
someone in the audience that is familiar with Robert's rules?
They get one vote. I think you get one vote.
You were right, Lyle. It's one vote
Thank you.
per person.
Okay. I will keep a tally. So all those in favor of David Scholes, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those in favor of Christina Naylor, please raise your hand. All those in favor of Ann Beekman, please raise your hand. And Christina Naylor received 4 votes, David Scholes 2, Ann Beekman 2. So Christina is the new board chair. I will turn this over to you, Christina.
In my joy, I would ask for nominations for board vice chair.
I nominate Ann Beekman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor of Ann Beekman as board vice chair, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes have it. And I would open nominations for board clerk.
I nominate Tim Morris.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor of Tim Morris as board clerk, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes have it. Moving on to new business. Frank, the fiscal 2020 budget.
Okay, for folks that don't have the document, I do have some copies here. I would be surprised if Bob has that, so if you would like to take one and many, and I do have extras. How are folks down here? Anyone? Okay.
Maybe
What's that?
I should have.
May I get a copy?
Actually, I'll take a hard copy because I don't have any for that.
There you
Do you have one?
You do? You go.
Thank you.
So at our last meeting that I participated in regarding this, the budget. Understanding was that it was going to be the recommendation, or it was the recommendation to the merged board. And what this document reflects is the individual approved school board budgets of the districts as they are governed today. So I can give you a very quick overview. If you look at the first page, the inside cover of the first page is sort of the summary of all of the budgets that are subject to the merger, which are now named Wyndham Southeast Supervisory School District. Wyndham Southeast School District. And you see in this document for the towns of Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, and then also the district of Brattleboro Union High School. We have a proposed budget of total expenditures in the middle section of the document, $50,172,289. And we have the funding through local and state grants, $49,155,000. And then you can see there's a difference there, and that number is down under the budgeted deficit of $1,017,000. And as you can see across these, the variances, or where you have more spending than revenue, is the intentional use of fund balance as contemplated by each of the district boards. There are some other statistics on that first page. Typically, this is the kind of data that is reported by all public school districts to the Agency of Education, what's called a functional presentation. Functional meaning direct instruction, student support, general administration, and so on. And then the data shows the proportion spent in those functions. And we also have a total student to staff ratio at the bottom as part of a statewide conversation that has been raised. The next page, page 2, I just wanted to give you a couple of highlights and then open it up for any questions you may have. Page 2 is, again, a traditional document that all towns are required to publish in their town reports. This, at the time we developed this, there has no commitment by this board. Obviously, it's your first meeting, so that's why we have a hypothetical title. But there it is again, the $50,172,000 that is on the previous page in terms of proposed spending. When we look at what the state identifies as offsetting revenues, which it's primarily going to be tuition revenue, and then the state grants associated with things like transportation and small schools grant. We have a reduction of the total budget of $9,648,000. That's the line reference 10 in that page 2. And so then the number that drives a tax rate calculation is the education spending figure of $40,523,000. And the funding formula for public education in Vermont essentially takes that number, divides by the equalized students in this new school district 2,234 to derive a cost per student, $18,139. And then that's compared to an index that the legislature sets every year. That threshold was announced at 18,311. That, you know, you can see our proposal is less than that threshold, so there is no penalty associated with this proposal. And then the final calculation to get to the estimated school property tax rate is comparing our 18,139, our spending per student, to another index that the state sets every year. At this point, they've estimated 10,666. So it's that ratio that sets the tax rate. We spend 18,000, compare that to 10,000. That's, you can see $1.70. That's the number on line 31. And when we compare to a hypothetical entity, if it existed, we know it doesn't right now, but if we just added all of the entities up in the current, what we call fiscal year 19 year, that rate is $1.67. So you see the difference there is 2 cents, 2.8 cents, or about a 1.7% change. Income sensitivity is probably more significant to folks when it's considering a commitment for paying for public education in Vermont, and that's the statistic on line 34. 2.77% is the statistic that is used for the calculation of to what extent do you pay on your property tax assessment or on your income. And that's there's quite a range of income that is subject to that rate. So that's the overview. The rest of the document essentially identifies each district's proposal, and I know you're all familiar, or most of you are familiar, with school district budget presentations, and so this follows that format. If you go back to the very first page of the document, you can quickly get to a school district if you want to. So, for example, the high school is on page 14, and the Dummerston School District is on page 87, and so on. There is one other document that is more of just statistics that you may find useful, and that's on page 7, and that's our enrollment by grade level based on the November student census that is submitted annually. This would have been the most recent submittal to the Agency of Education in November 2018. And then the lower block is, or the middle block of that data is the prior year, so the November 2017. And you see we're going from 2017, on the far right is the total of all those grade levels, 2,537, and moving up to the top, 2,562. So a pretty stable total enrollment, actually up a little bit. And these statistics include Vernon, just because this is the whole entity, and you can also see it is pre-K through grade 12. So that's it.
Thank you, Frank. How solid are we on the numbers that are the threshold numbers at this point? And
Legislature is still in session, so that is subject to change, but I have not heard that there's any significant consideration by the Ways and Means. I don't know if any other folks have gotten updates. I do believe there's 2 proposals on the yield. The yield is that number that we compare ourselves to in terms of cost per student, and I believe the House number is higher than 10,666, so if that prevails, these tax rates would go down. The Senate version is a little bit lower than 10,666, so these numbers would move up a little bit if they prevailed, but it's their discretion.
Madam Chair, Frank, a couple of questions. How is the common level of appraisal going to come into play here? Because obviously it affected each separate town, so how are they going to calculate the common level appraisal for the new unified district?
It does come into play. It is the one thing that remains unique in the unified system. So there is no cost per student for each school site as there used to be,
Right.
and that's what could produce very different tax rates depending on if one school went up or down in enrollment in one year. So that's why they call it an equalized tax rate. But there is no change to the way in which this equalized tax rate goes through the select board and the town office's process of assessing the school property tax rate, meaning it is subject to the common level of appraisal as it has been in the past. No difference. So this $1.70 is what will go to all the towns, and then if Brattleboro, I think, is 103%, so your $1.70 will get turned into $1.60 something, $1.63 maybe. But if you're, I don't know if anybody's below 100%. Putney a little bit.
It's 99.7, I think.
Okay, 99.7. So their CLA adjusted would be $1.70 plus a little.
Now, I can see here where I certainly was at the BUHS when they approved their budget, at their budget meeting, and the surplus revenues that each school has contributed, okay? So my question to you, how much surplus revenue will be carried forward when we go to approve this budget? Now, since this board has been elected, does that not freeze everything? Or where's that number going to come from? Or do you have that number off the top of your head?
Yeah, if you look at page 3, it's the balance sheets of the districts as of the last audit. So that would be June of 2018. We're rapidly approaching June of 2019, which will conduct another audit. So what you're referring to is the fund balance, and you see it cumulatively as of June of 18, the general fund, so that's line 6. Far right is 5.3 million. Now fiscal year 19 utilized a significant amount of those reserves, and then fiscal year 20 utilized a fair amount of those again. So I have not projected a fiscal year 19 or 20 balance sheet. That's something I typically don't do, but the fund balances have been significantly utilized for the traditional purpose of reducing the tax liability. And I would say just that it's not significantly different than what you see in this proposal on page 2, where I referred to the middle of the page, and I think you were looking at that figure, 1,017 is the total use of fund balance. It's a similar number for this fiscal year that we're about to close.
And one last question, Madam Chair. Is there any capital projects coming forward from some of the outlying towns that I'm obviously don't pay enough attention to or don't read about, that the new board will be proposing at the new annual meeting?
So yes, every town has a capital plan. The high school and the Brattleboro Town District and the Putney District have followed a similar format in terms of a document that identifies major building systems and campus facility use, everything from parking lots to stormwater drainage to all roofing systems, mechanical systems, and so on. And they project the useful life of those major systems. So the board does have that, and I have copies of all those capital plans. I think I better
But the
distributed
question
that.
is, will there, when we go to the meeting, whatever that, you're gonna set that date, I think this evening, are there gonna be article questions for capital projects warned at the
That's a
meeting?
good
That's what the question.
Yeah. I don't believe there would be, and that would be the type of thing that we did like at Green Street when we have the $900,000 project. Those sorts of major projects have been just recently committed, but there will be likely a project vote on the Academy School addition that you heard about a little bit earlier. But the Brattleboro Town Board has not committed to that. They've committed to studying it, but not to proposing it as a bid.
Putney,
Yeah.
Emerson, Guilford.
All towns have just recently, well, not all towns, but most towns have recently gone through major energy retrofits and system upgrades. So the capital plans show that there's a significant amount of need in the future, but it's nothing that's not usual and customary.
And I'd like to follow up in your question, Mr. DeGray, that I think it would be helpful on this budget if the town CLA adjusted tax rates were included. I know the transitional board thought that that was important information so that the voters would understand what their tax rate was going to be, because our financing system for education is not particularly crystalline, so it's just helpful to know the bottom line. So I think that we should take heed of your question, because I think you follow the education funding structure. So.
Yeah, and we do have those, we discussed them as a transition board, just so you have them verbally, and we can make sure that there's a schedule that's made available. So Brattleboro Town, these are all estimates because they're subject to those yield numbers and what else? I guess the legislature can change all of the state indices, but projected Brattleboro Town School District $1.64, Dummerston $1.64, Guilford $6.87, and then Putney $7.06. And the reason why the state provides the format of page 2, the reason why they don't put that on there is because they're not really comparable numbers. They're hard for folks that don't understand the CLA to realize that Putney is paying only 99% of tax assessed value or market value. You're paying 99% of market value because the tax assessments are lower than what folks are seeing their real estate transaction occur at. In Brattleboro, it's the opposite. Brattleboro's tax assessments have been set higher than market sales. And so these are things that the school board doesn't control, and most folks are not that familiar with these sort of statistics. So that's why the state doesn't, this is their form, don't put CLA adjusted rates because they're absolutely not comparable. But as Christina said, they are the real deal. They are what shows up in the mailbox on the tax document.
Are there any questions from board members?
I just wanted to, your question about the CLA effect, so that rate then, those numbers don't really mean anything until you compare it to previous years. So you see what the effect is on the budget.
I have two
Emily.
questions. So what you're saying, Frank, is the fund balances that are listed here, since they're from fiscal year 18, these aren't actually the funds that each district would be bringing into the new district?
We've got to close the books that still has a month to go.
Okay.
And then say, well, did we have a surplus or a deficit for this fiscal period? And they adjust those numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question is, as far as liabilities, I know this was talked about before, but the new district would be assuming all these liabilities?
Yes.
Thank you.
All assets and liabilities.
Okay.
Anything else? You guys are good with 116 pages. Mr.
Just
Scholes.
a follow-up from the transition board conversation about looking for, Ricky made synthesize the conversation about where we might find reductions. And the transition board recommended that we look at, I recommend a series of places to look at, but we see if we could find some places where reductions could be made. So I just wanted to see if that is still alive and get some sense of how that's going to proceed. If it is, we actually have to, the board recommended that, but the transition board, but that's not going to happen unless we also make that recommendation. So I guess I would move that we ask administration to consider the identified areas and any others that might exist for reducing the amount of the budget.
I hear a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Emily. All those in favor of David's, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Just give it a little discussion, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Sorry about that.
So no, just a process issue. So because this is so David's request is pretty routine for normal circumstances where a budget is presented to a board and administration is asked to, provide an analysis of where are the opportunities to reduce costs and tell us the impact on programs. So that's what David has raised is absolutely, routine. What is unique is the origins of these plans are from a former board, and the question I have of you is, to what extent do you want the administration to engage the former board in this discussion? Or do you want us to just go back to the principals and say, merged boards ask for potential program changes, cost reductions, so it's a process issue. Do we go to our local boards, or do we just go to our principals and give you our typically we would just go to our principals and there is no other board, but we're in a one-of-a-kind situation.
You seem to have.
Yeah, I didn't add, we don't have the motion in front of us, so I can't read from it, but I didn't ask for any program changes whatsoever. There were very specific lines, things like reduce salaries because we've replaced senior teachers with lower teachers, taking those. It looks like you did that when you hired your new principal, but we haven't done that yet with our new principal. And tuition lines typically are very prudently filled. There's a lot of money. I'd ask for a 3 to 5 year actual for those expenses. That's no effect on program. The dues and, the line says interest, I think it says debt, interest, and dues. And obviously if there's any debt or interest that has to be paid, that has to be paid. But there are a number of dues that are paid that will not have any impact on student learning if we don't pay them this year. And then we can look and see, was there any loss or any difficulties there. Maintenance and supplies typically have some room for flexibility. That would be reasonable to talk to principals about. But again, nothing to do with programs. And then looking at all the money that was budgeted for school boards, and then figuring out how much this board would cost, and then reducing that to just places that don't really impact what goes on in the classrooms.
Sorry.
Yep. My question, being new to this process of not being involved in transition boards, what's the timeline as far as adoption of this, and how does that impact the annual vote?
So Ricky intelligently pointed out that because the budget is voted from the floor, that these changes, we have to warn the budget now in order to have it done by the end of June, but that we could make changes from the floor at the budget meeting if we come up with savings.
So Dave, what you're asking for is not to change the adopted amount tonight, but to talk about this stuff to have at the annual meeting.
Yeah, Frank made it obviously clear that the 2 days that we were going to give him to do all this was not realistic. And Ricky, since we would have over a month before then, the suggestion was that we come with an amendment proposal at the beginning of that meeting, if there's savings available.
Madam Chair, I just want to say too that procedurally, if I'm correct, what would happen is at the annual meeting, there would be a suggestion to reduce the budget by a set dollar amount. individual line items are not placed into that. It's just a dollar amount, and then it's up to the board and the administration to find where those cuts are. So you might go in saying we want to cut the budget by X number of dollars, and you know where those are going to come from, but the floor doesn't have line item veto on the budget. So just so that's clear on everybody's mind.
Jamie?
I wanted to echo that we were very explicit that it was administrative and not programmatic costs, and that there was a very clear motion that we passed. I thought it was a motion, so it should be documented. I don't recall in the minutes. And that the discussion was that we wouldn't have the amount of time that we needed in order to address those costs, and that it was this process of, I didn't realize it was just a total number, but that folks were going to make suggestions. It was my understanding with that research that Frank was going to produce on the floor.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you could state your name and your town.
Yes, this
For the
is,
benefit
I'm
of
Jamie
people.
Comtois from Putney.
Thank you. Any other questions on the budget, on the motion on the floor, sorry?
I will just mention also that whenever you look at revisiting the budget assumptions, we've been made aware that Putney has found the need to hire additional teachers. So, we would want to, of course, inform you of additional costs that are coming at us that were not known when this budget was proposed as well. So that's it. But that's just the nature of, we all know budgets are only estimates, and reality changes those estimates.
Are we ready for a vote? All those in favor of David's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and nays? One nay? It sounded like, actually, can I have a show of hands just so I can get a count, because I couldn't really.
Can you read the motion again?
Can you read the motion, Tim? Do you have it?
Yeah, hold on a second, sorry. Take this and find it.
Do you want to restate it and I'll scroll it down?
David moved that the administration considered identified areas for reductions. That's what I had.
So the motion from David was to consider identified areas from the transition board meeting might be helpful in that, to reduce the budget. Does that sum up your motion?
That's it. Yeah, just have one.
Evelyn?
Should we add, I don't know if we can add at this point, but should we add in that it's administrative so that it reflects the previous transitional board's recommendation?
Uh,
Though there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, are you willing to amend your
Yeah,
motion?
that examine the recommended, designated, whatever the line was, non-programmatic reductions.
So this motion would have inherent in it a timeline, is that right? Between now and the 25th?
Yes.
So that would be the time that this motion could be implemented as an advisory.
Well, hopefully we'll meet between, I suspect we'll meet between now and then. There may be some
No,
progress.
but
Yeah.
that's the time period, between now and the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any further clarification on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions?
Abstain.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes.
I'll abstain also.
Okay, so 2 abstentions. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. Back to the budget. Any other questions on the 116 pages here in front of you? There'll be a quiz later.
Can I get a copy? Is there another copy? Or I can get one later on?
I can get it online now because I have a password, so you can have mine here.
Thanks.
Any further discussion on the budget?
Just a question. So we would be talking about this, I'm assuming, at our next meeting too, because if we're going to be presenting it to the public, we're gonna need to prepare a little more than what we did right now, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is just for discussion for us right now.
It's very important that we move it today and that we're comfortable with what we're moving today and understand what we're moving today, and then we have a month to prepare ourselves to have someone able to explain the aforementioned budget. Are there any questions from the floor?
Jamie Comtois Putney, Franz at the last transition board meeting, who I don't know very well, but you guys in Brattleboro, I think, know him quite well, had articulated a process by which Brattleboro usually goes through its budgetary process. And because I've been new to serving the school board, I am not completely clear what each of the towns historically has done around communicating with their voters and educating them and answering questions prior to the vote. So I wondered if additional processes or steps need to be established as a part of the new merged board, in addition to the meeting on the 25th that will be warned tonight, so that folks will start creating a culture of communicating effectively, both to the folks in the towns and here in Brattleboro. And I will say, as somebody who traveled from Putney tonight versus traveling from my home 7 minutes from to my school, it really changes how I can participate in budgetary discussions, having to travel to Brattleboro, and the impact it's going to have on some of the more rural towns. I live almost on the Westminster border. So I just put that out as something I'm really curious about as we go into a new age in our region.
Yes, David.
A question, the thought about that. I guess the first question is, since we don't actually have an agenda, I'm not sure. I was going to suggest that we schedule a couple of, given the turnout that elected us, which I think is maybe a little over 600 people, all told, across, maybe more. I didn't, I'm not sure exactly, but not many. And I think we need to consider what that means and what kind of support we may or may not have for the budget. And I would encourage us to schedule a public meeting in Dummerston for the people in the northern end, and a public meeting in Guilford for the people in Algiers would be even better, for the people at the southern end, and do the presentations that typically, you do them at town meeting. We have a separate representative town meeting budget presentation where we go over it with the community, and then we do it again at town meeting with people that didn't come to that meeting. And I know it's hard to know what to say about this, other than I think maybe going over the work that the transition committee did around the values that are behind these numbers. But I think that, that would be extremely valuable. I think people may have more material, what's this number, what's that number, questions. But I think we need to start building support pretty much immediately. And we've got a month. Well, assuming that we set a date within 30 days. We've got a month, and I think we need to do that work.
Yes.
In addition, we'll have to have an informational meeting within 10 days of the 25th meeting.
So that's already in the statute, or in the, okay, good, well, that's good.
So I'm hearing that it might be a good idea for us to have multiple informational meetings in various locations, and I'm seeing some nodding as a way to make sure that people are engaged. And this is an unusual time for us to budget. People may think they've already budgeted. I think it's been very confusing to the public, so maybe if we can try to do some local things that might be helpful in explaining how this is all working, so people understand what's going on. And maybe we could have people who are from that area who are familiar. So however we decide to do this, if we're in Guilford, it'd be nice to have both Guilford people available as people local in the town who, oh, I know Sean, okay. I feel comfortable asking him a question or whatever. That might be really helpful if we could do that. Do we want to schedule that now? Does that seem like a good way to go forward? I'm seeing nodding.
I think it sounds good. I think scheduling makes sense. My question would be it wouldn't be just for the people, like let's say in Guilford, it would probably be good for other people because we're now together to also volunteer to go to certain ones, maybe not.
Oh,
everybody as well.
absolutely. I didn't mean to preclude other people.
Yeah.
It also gives people an opportunity, if they can't make the one that's in Putney or Dummerston area, they can go to the one in Brattleboro and they'll be getting the same information, which is a nice
No, I meant board
asset.
members.
And then the board, I'd like to have other board members there too.
Just for
Yes,
faces
yes,
of the new
yes,
board.
absolutely, absolutely. So do you want to do a minute of scheduling here? Counting 10 days back from the 25th. Anybody got some suggestions for informational meetings? Assuming we're going to warn that in a minute, the budget for the 25th?
I'll make a suggestion of June 18th because there are no graduation or move-up days that night.
Would the 19th be possible? That's typically our school board night, but we don't have a meeting.
That's BAM's graduation.
Oh, that's, nope.
So June 18th,
Is no graduation.
no graduations.
Are you going to schedule both town options at the same date, on the same date?
I was assuming we would do 3 different.
Okay. So which one are you planning on?
The official info meeting is what I was thinking. That's within the 10-day window.
So we'll do that somewhere in the Brattleboro area on June 18th.
Ruby has a question.
Sorry to
interrupt you, but
My name is Ruby McAdoo. I'm from Putney. That's the last day of school. It's a half day. We're hopefully having a pool party in Putney. I'm sure you're invited. And I cannot see engagement being that high on that day. And I would, although it like accelerates your timeline and what you have to do, I would urge you to think about dates that are prior to the close of school. Because June 19th, I mean, the turnout was bad for the vote. It's going to be impossible to get anyone but, you know, like a few of us from Putney out. So anyway, so that I would just urge you to consider before June 18th.
So we're planning on doing one in the Putney-Dummerston area, so for that one, you're encouraging before June 18th,
Yes.
especially.
And June 18th is the close of school for every, I think
Yes.
they've all voted at this point that it's half
The problem
days.
is the 10 days is the 15th, which is a Saturday. The 17th is Putney graduation, the 19th is BAM's graduation, the 20th is BUHS awards night, the 21st is graduation. I suppose we could do it the 24th, which is the day before.
I'd like to go.
it strikes me that you could potentially do the Dummerston, Molly Stone or Dummerston. You could potentially do the Dummerston Putney one on the 19th because none of the students go to BAMS. Although that doesn't fit with what you were asking.
I'm thinking that we need to have an official, in addition to the 2 that were recommended for
Yeah.
North and South. So I'm thinking that the North and South ones would both be well before, within the next few weeks, I would think.
Not including the 10, they don't have to follow the 10 days.
Is there something before June 18th that is available to do a North and South?
Can you do the 6th?
June 6th. Something's going on, let's see. Maybe
It's
they-
the Elk student dinner. Elk student.
Oh, I'm not available yet.
Okay. June 4 is the Putney board meeting on June 4. Do you want to do one on Putney that night? Like start your board meeting early and then,
We could do that.
does that sound okay?
That's a good idea.
June 4, is it Tuesday? Are these 6 o'clock?
What day?
June
Our meetings
4th.
are 6:30 at night. She just asked if we could go earlier so that we could have this informational meeting afterwards.
So what time would be a good time on June 4th in Putney?
I don't know what your agenda looks like that night. How much you have?
I don't know what our agenda looks like that far in advance. It looks long, actually. suddenly realized 2 different board members had sent me like 5 agenda items each.
Can we go back to the original 4:15 time?
Well, not everybody's here. Tim, Jamie, can we, that Thursday, do the 4:15? Because we'll still be being informational afterwards. But
Maybe we could do 5. I thought that was impacting Sergio's work schedule.
it does, but I've got like 5 agenda items from 2 members of the board, and if we go at 5, we're not going to get through them. And that's, I haven't even added my own agenda items to that yet.
Could there be an adjournment for the budget information session?
Yeah, I think we
If
could
it
probably
goes-
do that. And I'll check with Sergio, because sometimes he can make arrangements.
So June 4, Putney, do we have a time?
I think we decided on 4:15.
No, for your meeting.
Oh,
your
yeah,
meeting,
for our,
and then for this-
yes.
6:30, 7, what do you say? Anybody? I'm saying 7, how does that sound? Okay.
Plenty of time.
Okay, maybe we ought to go
You
with,
can go with 5 then.
yeah, we'll go with 5 then.
It gives you,
So that's Tuesday, the 18th.
That's the 3rd. And then the other one was the 18th. That's the one.
The 18th is at 7 at Putney.
No, 4th is at 7 at Putney. What time is the, if we were doing the 18th as the official one, what time would that one be at? Or we don't know? We don't know yet. We can, Okay, just making sure I didn't write it
Okay,
down.
so the 4th, Tuesday the 4th.
what time is the high school information, or we don't really have an informational meeting in Dummerston, so what time is an informational meeting typically done?
6:30, 6:30, yeah.
6:30.
Shall we do the 18th at 6:30?
That sounds good. Thank you.
And then do we want to try to schedule one for the town of Guilford? One more day in June.
I guess could I inquire
Yes, sir.
what, these budgets were approved. I mean, they're not valid approval in reality, but each town had town meetings had budget discussions for them. So under redundancy, redundant. So I'm wondering why you're trying to appease all these towns when all of these, they know what their budgets are. I mean, I'm looking through here, and are you going to make any a line item adjustment? The salary was set in April, and yet the line item for board salaries is all different from all the different towns. Are you going to kind of tweak this budget, or what's going to happen there? But to go back to doing all these meetings, I think you're expending a lot of energy. I understand what you're trying to do, but I'll give you the over and under, maybe 15 when you hold a meeting at 6:30. And I'm going to go under with that number. So I appreciate what you're trying to do, but do you really think you're going to get a lot of people to come out? I don't, sadly. I wish more would come out.
Sean?
I would concur with Dick, and because we had the informational meetings at the high school prior to our, and that was the largest, and I think France was there from Brattleboro. Nobody else was there. So I think, I think I agree that it'd be nice to have everybody involved, but I think it's going to be difficult to achieve. So, we have a lot of other stuff that we have to do as a board now. Decision-making and other things, I think, in a way, have more priority. If there is a meeting on the 18th in Brattleboro, that would be the real meat of the informational meeting for this $50 million budget. And it seems like it might suffice.
Would Guilford feel slighted if there wasn't a second meeting, if the official meeting became the second meeting?
Well, in the transition
Just send
meeting
it
that
to-
we had the other night on Thursday, I think there were just a couple of Guilford residents there. So, and that wasn't about the budget. The budget had been vetted in Guilford, I think, at some of those school board meetings I went to, and they were quite well attended in budget development way back in, when was that, February. So I think if people wanted to be involved, then that would have been the time to do it.
Jamie?
Jamie Comtois, Putney. I was able to vote on a $3.5 million budget in Putney and had discussions about that budget. On June 25th, I will have the opportunity to vote up or down and participate in amendments of a $50 million budget. It's the first time that I, as a voter, will have that opportunity. So what we're doing now is not about whether or not people will participate in a democratic process. It is about laying the groundwork and our opportunity to create space for a new process as democratic process and participation is being limited. So I would encourage us as a body, or you as a body, to think about what this day forward means for the precedents that we set and expectations of each other, and would encourage us to start creating that system.
Any other thoughts? I'm inclined because it is a change in everything we've done. I mean, I could find something better to do in the evening in June for sure. We all could. But I feel like this has been pushed so quickly on our voters, and the opportunity to engage people and explain, okay, this is what it means, because clearly by the voter turnout, people didn't turn out in the ways they normally do for a vote. So I think it's whatever we can do to start this unified board off right and having communication would be helpful, and that people don't come to the actual budget meeting not understanding what's going on, and that they have had an opportunity to have questions answered and have a chance to understand what the unified board is. So I guess the question to me is 2 meetings enough or 3? I think that's the question on the floor right now. Are we happy with 2 meetings, 2 informational meetings?
I'd say 2 sounds pretty good, especially since, you know, Guilford has said their folks, if they did want to, would probably come to another one or maybe the official one. I guess I wonder, we had pretty good participation at a forum that we did in March. Obviously it was around voting time, but it was live broadcasted by BCTV, and maybe people could then, they actually gave questions and they would type them in, and then, you know, the questions could be answered at the forum. So that might be a way of building some community sentiment moving forward, because actually they'd have, even if they couldn't get there, they'd have an ability to have their voice heard. I don't know what the cost of BCTV are because I'm new to the board, but that might be something, either we consider it for this one or we consider for future.
So how about if in the next week before our next meeting, I figure out how that could be done and what it would cost, and we can decide as a board if that makes sense for us to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Great idea. Thank you, Emily.
Ruby Macker again from Putney. I have 2 things. One, I would really love it if we would not call the Brattleboro one official. If you could just correct yourself if you remember that in the future. But also, I think all of this is great, wonderful, but I would encourage this board to consider the transition board's work on the value statements and coalesce them in a much more digestible way for the public. Because the 4 towns presented things that were really different, different levels of engagement, different audiences. But I think those actually are the pieces that the public will digest much better than the enormous document. And it might actually encourage people to start thinking about that enormous document differently. So that would just be my encouragement to do that.
Apologies, I meant during the official 10-day warning, not like it's the big and best one, so sorry.
Tara?
There's an app called Slido, which allows you to interact and post questions that you might want to research as an opportunity to enable you to have broader discussions with people who are watching via CCV.
Sure, no, there's not for that. Thank you.
Offering ideas from the floor, Molly Stoner Dormson. I also wonder about the television production at the high school and whether high school students might be interested or able to help with that process. And what a great way to use them.
I can say as the board chair, that sounds great, but we have so much on our plate right now in such a little time that I think there's only so many research projects that, so let's kick that down if that is okay with the board, that somebody keeps their mind on that and their eye on ways that we can involve students in our board's process and talk about ways we can sort of change what we've been doing and unify with our students more. David?
Yeah, I think what Dick said about turnout is certainly what we've experienced, but that depends a lot on how you present what's going to be happening there. And I think rather than just, I would suggest that we consider asking 2 or 3 people to get together and develop sort of an article that can go to the various media, from Front Porch Forum to the Commons Reform and anywhere else in between, and a press release, and maybe a few other steps of outreach or information releasing that would maybe generate a little bit of interest and get people curious, particularly around the values behind the budgets. I think that's a really smart way to. And I would volunteer to do that. And I'd volunteer Jamie to help out.
Right here,
Maybe
communications
volunteer.
plan on budget. You thought it all through.
Okay.
I'm ready.
That's a,
So why don't you just bring it to our next meeting?
I'm ready to help with that document too. I think that's great.
is there anybody else that would like to assist on our first formal subcommittee? Thank you, Emily.
Get a pro on the team.
So I have Emily, David, and Jamie working on outreach, and you'll bring something to our next meeting whenever we schedule that?
Yeah.
And if there's anybody else that's interested in doing that from other boards,
Yeah,
go to board meetings and see if...
We'll advertise the date, the time of the meeting widely for when we get together.
Great, thank you. Just got so many open meeting laws to violate now in terms of quorum, so we have to be thoughtful if we get a quorum of any of the sub-boards or of this board, that we make sure we go through the warning process. Just so many ways to go wrong when trying to do things right. So we've decided on June 4th, the 18th, we have a committee working on outreach. We probably have to have a committee working on the budget and explaining the budget. And who's going to be making the presentation? Yes, Liz.
This is totally off topic, but can somebody turn those fans off? I'm freezing.
I'm sitting in a meat locker.
Are there any budget ninjas among us? I'm happy to work on it. I would.
I think you should.
It would be great if someone who served on the high school board, which is a large portion of this budget, who has maybe been part of presenting high school budgets in the past, would be willing to step up in some way and assist, because it is a large portion of the budget.
Or maybe a couple of people.
Oh yeah, maybe a couple people.
Too, Ricky.
Yeah, I can do that. Bob Woodworth has been the one that is sort of the point person for the high school budget in terms of the explanation at the meeting. and he does it. Ricky has done some also, but Bob has done historically an excellent job. So, and working in conjunction with Frank to, go through the budget and pull out the salient points of pluses and minuses and additions and subtractions or whatever. So we are going to have one more informational meeting at our BOHS board, our next BOHS board meeting. We'll have the budget info, I believe. Isn't that correct, Frank?
For the high school?
Yeah.
June 3rd?
Yeah. So that actually could be maybe coupled with the, if there was information out there that June 3rd is going to be a BOHS informational budget meeting, and then we have our regular full annual meeting on the 12th of June. Or not the annual meeting, well, it is. Because, yeah, there will be a special meeting in order to get the approval of the budget, we hope, at that evening. So
it's possible if the legislature adjourns and leaves the law intact, then that meeting would not occur, or the information piece wouldn't occur on the budget, right? And then there would not be a budget vote. But that special meeting has 2 articles, and that needs to proceed.
Yeah.
Would it be prudent to have somebody from each existing board that now sits on this board talk about their budgets at the high school, and then you as the chair can give an overview? I mean, these people who put these budgets together on each of these boards, like Sean was on the high school board, and I would agree, but you and Dummerston and the Putney, and I think if those people that served on those boards would talk about their budgets because they know them better than anybody else, I think that might serve you well, and would get more of you involved and let the public, you go to those meetings and you have one talking head and everybody sits there. So I think it would be a good idea to have the different boards, at least for the first year. And then next year, because you're all going to put the budget together, you'll all be much more aware of each school's spending process.
I love that suggestion, Dick, and it helps me move the question along. I've reframed my question. I'll be there because I can explain all the budget line items for the Dummerston budget. And I think it would be great for a member from every town to be there to be able to answer questions about the line item in your town's budget so that it's very clear to our voters. So it would be in your best interest, from all the work you have done in the past, in my mind, to have a member from each board available. I think it's a great suggestion. So
that would be on the 18th you're speaking, right?
For the meetings on the
or the meeting
4th and the 18th. For explaining, if we're going to do a budget presentation, the 4th and the 18th.
Yeah, and the 25th.
And the 25th, yeah. So now do I have any other volunteers? Okay. Ann. So I've got Ann from Putney, who's volunteered. Christina for the Dummerston budget.
I'll see if I can get somebody from our board to come. I can't do that.
Okay. Guilford and the high school.
Well, I was going to do the high school.
You'll do the high school?
Yeah. Once again, it's a very large budget, and to coalesce the salient points, could I do it right now? No. Could I do it with some help? Yes.
Well, maybe outside this meeting we can do a little outreach and see if there's somebody who's willing.
Bob really already has done numerous times. He did it on Monday.
Right.
So
it'll be fresh in his mind, actually.
Yeah.
On the 4th, for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe do you feel comfortable reaching out to somebody from the high school board and?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's just the Guilford budget. Is there? Or you can phone a friend too. Okay, excellent. So if you could just let me know who that is, if we want to set up maybe a meeting, because we've got to warn the meeting, because we will be a quorum on the board. So we'll have to warn the meeting and take minutes, because we're doing the work of a board and we'll be a quorum, so.
And if you set that meeting date, or?
No. Sometime before the 4th of June, I suppose, would be good. There's so many days, and I guess it would be really helpful to have Frank be available, probably. So Frank, what's your dance card look like?
Very full, but
Yes.
I love public education. I'm there. That's where it is. So throw some dates.
Let's see. Wonder if we could team it up with anybody's meeting time so that
Well,
people.
we do have a finance meeting for BOHS, but you probably have tons of stuff right after that. But we could do it, that's at 8 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah.
Wednesday, the.
I can't remember which Wednesday.
Got it. Yeah, Wednesday the 5th.
Oh, so I'm doing it for our 4th.
Yeah.
June 5th? That's after our June 4th
Right.
informational meeting. That might not be the best timing. We have to do it kind of.
Well, the other thing I could do would be to get Bob's cheat sheet, and I could use that, which means that I don't really need to be involved. I could use, because he had all the points, you know, because he and Frank worked on it, as they always have, collaboratively for years. And I could, if I had Bob's cheat sheet, then I could give that report.
Okay.
And no need to have involvement at a meeting itself. Unless you thought.
I think it would be good for us to have a meeting just to have an idea of how we're going to present, because people have all presented budgets before, and some people haven't actually. And so to have a format and just in some way, maybe to have somebody put together a sheet that kind of boils down that 116 pages into something that's a little more consumable for the average person who doesn't think it's really fun to read that whole state 3-year average page like I do. So I think that's my idea, is we could have an opportunity just to find a way to have a format for a meeting and make sure everybody's on board with what they're doing. And then, so Emily, do you have a...
Do you think, so since Guilford might phone a friend, there might be a different person, Brattleboro doesn't know who the representative is yet at that meeting.
Right.
You're still considering, do you think we should just get some times and dates from Frank and then do a doodle poll once we have representatives?
We can't do well, we can do a meeting. We can email for purposes of scheduling a meeting, so we can do that.
Those people will all be
Yes.
available.
All right, so yes, that sounds like a good way to do it, since we don't know who's going to.
And maybe defer Frank's schedule since he's probably heaviest right now.
Right, it's too hard to figure. That's a great idea. Okay, so let's, if everybody can get back to me by the end of the weekend with whoever you've found to be your representative, and then.
And as far as a date, June 3rd would be possible. The day before that, June 4th meeting, so if that's enough time. There is a 7 o'clock VHS meeting, so it would have to be, early afternoon, or I don't know if folks can do it during the regular portion of the workday, but I could meet on Monday, the 3rd.
Okay.
So maybe just leave the time open to when folks are available.
But it would be late afternoon before 7, or before 6.
I assume, yeah, because the high school board is definitely scheduled for 7.
And Guilford has one at 6:30.
Oh, yeah, and actually the high school board's also doing an information meeting, probably at 6:30 or, yeah, so it need to be, before that.
Okay.
An incredible amount of activity.
Yeah, it's a great time to have this going on. Well, let's defer this to what we can schedule via email and see what we can put together so we can do it before the 4th. Otherwise, maybe we have to move that 4th date. Maybe that's too aggressive for that meeting date. That's the other option. So get me your representative names and we'll put schedules together and put something together, and we'll pass that information along to the Communication Outreach Committee so they can inform the press and let people know, get that out there.
So you're saying maybe the 4th is the meeting date, if that's time's too constrained?
Yeah, that's pretty quick
Yeah, okay.
for us to be ready to present and
Yeah.
have the information perhaps for a 25th vote. Seeing as today is the 22nd, it's like, that's fast. Does that work for everybody? Excellent.
Christina?
Yes, Jamie?
It just strikes me, in my experience, you want a 2-week communications window. So whatever the communications committee does should be pretty soon, so that we can appropriately warn and get people to start scheduling. So we're in that now.
That's why I'm wondering if the 4th is a little aggressive, and we maybe need to move that date, because I don't even have victims. I don't even have volunteers in my presentation. So, yeah. And by the time we get through a long weekend, and we've found those people, 4th looks like it was a great idea because it worked with every schedule, but maybe we need to revisit that for the next week somehow with something that isn't happening in Putney or Dummerston, or put it on with the Dummerston board meeting the next week.
Is that the 11th, the Tuesday? Are yours Tuesdays?
Yeah, ours are Tuesdays.
So it's the 11th.
So we'll keep you posted. But actually, the main event would be the actual budget itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we all set on informational dates and committees and everybody's action items for what we need to do to get people on the committees? Then I would go entertain a motion.
You already have one on the floor.
We do have one on the floor?
There's a motion on the floor to approve the budget.
Oh, there is?
Right.
Thank you. Who made that motion?
I don't remember who made it, but it was made and seconded, and then you had discussion.
It's been a long schedule. Was that today?
We should have handled that motion first, huh? Yes.
Well, I could say I'd like to reiterate a motion
Thank you.
that we approve the 2019-2020, and it would be the Wyndham Southeast School District budget in the amount of $50,172,299.
Second. We're already just reiterating.
Yeah, we didn't have a dollar value, though. I don't remember.
We didn't have a dollar
Yeah.
value, so I
Okay.
don't-
So
I
that's,
think the reiteration is
Thank
probably
you.
clearer than the original.
that's probably why I didn't remember. I'm a money girl. Any further discussion?
Sean, if you wouldn't mind, I know you referred to the 299 on page 2, and there's just a little rounding difference. So
Oh, okay.
most of the data, it's on page 1 that doesn't deal with the rounding, so it's
Oh, okay.
it's 289 instead of 299. It's $10 difference. Just if you wouldn't mind doing the 50,172,289.
That's just what I was going to say.
Thank you.
So approving the budget in the amount of $50,172,289. Thank you, Frank. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Whew. That's a lot of money. Amendments to articles. So I did not bring copies of the transition board's approved articles. And there are new people on the board who have not had, who've just been elected, who have not actually had a chance to do any work. I have my computer copy, but I don't have hard copies with all our changes. So I'm going to suggest, given that it's 8:22 and we still have some things to do, that we table this discussion to the next meeting so that everybody can read up on the articles.
Is this draft on the website?
It is it on the website?
I do remember. I'll check.
So we should get that up on the website.
Okay. If you can send it the
I will
most up.
I will send the most updated copy. Yes, Lyle.
I read in the last minutes that you suggested July 9th as a possible Australian ballot for those.
Yes.
I would ask that you would let me contact each of the town clerks. It's the week right after the 4th of July. I would not want to put an Australian ballot on a town clerk that is going to be on vacation, and maybe there's a substitute, summer vacations. I like to work with town clerks, not against them.
We all appreciate your thoughtfulness. Yes, Sean.
Actually, per Ricky's suggestion at the meeting when the July 9th vote came up, that date, I called Hillary and Jonathan in Putney and Lori in Dummerston and my own town clerk, but she wasn't in today. So sort of discussing it, what I came up with for an idea was to ask the 4 town clerks to email Barb with the most ideal date, and then we'll choose one that does the least harm. Because it's, you know, a special voting is quite expensive. It's probably close to $7,000. So in this vote that we just had on Tuesday, there were 659 votes cast. And if it did cost $7,000, it's kind of a guess on my part with some input from some town clerks, that would be every voter $10.62. So that's how much every voter, they didn't get the money, but they spent it.
Yes.
So, you know, it's really too bad that there wasn't a bigger turnout. So I think that would be one of the, and I think David alluded to that, that's one of the most important things for us going forwards is, I mean, David's been saying it since day one with the leadership councils and somehow trying to engage all the people in all 4 towns.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding, and I think it might be a good opportunity to have this board kind of take a look at what's been done. And now that we are on a unified board and thinking that way, and not just taking direction from our individual boards, it's a different mandate sitting here now than what we had last week. So I think that sounds like a good idea, and finding the best date to do it before too much time passes so we can get it done, but finding a date that works and a date that allows us to get the communication about the articles to the voters would be prudent. So let's table that discussion as well until we've heard back from town clerks. You sound like you're volunteering to collect the information from the town clerks.
Well, what I suggested would be to have the town clerks actually email Barb, and then, I guess.
Yeah, we can
do
that. We do need to be careful. We have to fall within that 30 day for warning.
Right.
If it's any time before July 9th, we would have to probably have 40th day is next Thursday, I believe. So it would have to be next week if we were to do it on the 9th. I don't know that we can really get it in before the 9th.
I wouldn't expect we wanted to do it during 4th of July week, so I don't think that's a good idea. If we're trying to engage voters and have participation, that doesn't seem like a good time to do it to me.
These articles won't be able to be amended, right?
I'll answer that in 1 second. Jamie had her.
I
I was speaking to our town clerk in Putney. He informed me today that Australian ballot voting would happen on July 9th, so he was under the impression that that date was solidified, so we might need to communicate pretty clearly with him pretty quickly. And I also, I don't know if this is appropriate time, but at some point I want to address my concerns about the commingling that the Secretary of State is recommending, so I don't know when to do that.
We could do that at the end under other business. Yes?
So my question is, these articles will not be able to be amended. They're either going to get voted up or down. And is it a total, or does every town all towns have to pass them? The 4 towns have to pass them?
That depends on the actual amendment, because the default articles that were handed down from the Agency of Education specify articles that are changed by a commingled vote of all the 4 towns, and other articles are changed by every town approving the vote. So those results, in my mind, cannot be commingled. So it depends on what so each article has on the back of the default articles, each article in the default articles under which we are operating from July 1st until the time we change, it says at the end, this cannot be changed at all, or this article can be changed by each and every town approving it, or this article can be changed by a vote of a majority of all the people in all the towns.
There is mine, right?
I have a color-coded, worked-out sheet that I'm happy to forward to you if you're interested.
Yeah, please.
It's green, yellow, red. So. Yes, Sean.
Good. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of the vote would be that if we are going to have a special election, then everything that can possibly be on that day for the ballot, because it'd be Australian ballot, every question would be included, so that we only have, because we can't just keep doing special votes. So I would say that, maybe representation questions. And as Lyle said at one transitional meeting quite a while ago, there's no deadline for having the articles, we could do it between now and X. So anyway, I'd love to get everything so there's one day, and then it was enticing enough that everybody's going to be interested in come vote.
So Sean, I've heard you say that we need to get it done quickly, and then we need to get everything done on one vote. Is that correct? Am I correct?
Well, we have to make the decision on what the vote will be,
right,
which is going to take a while, because we haven't even talked about representation either.
Right.
So I think there are many more items that could be solidified tonight.
There's more items that could be solidified?
No, more items than can be.
Oh, then can be. I thought you said that could be solidified tonight. Okay, I was going to call in for dinner. Lyle, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to put out the idea that if we are looking for a large turnout at this time, my guess is it's going to be September. I don't know if that's quick enough for what you're thinking. It does certainly give you a good amount of time to make sure that the articles are as you want them and have been vetted by your attorney before we put them out there. But I feel like right now you are moving really fast, and you may not have them all done, and you may not have them exactly as you are, because there will be some time involved just having them vetted by the attorney.
Seems to me we could get a subcommittee going on articles. David?
Yeah, I hear all the things that are being said. I recognize I think all the implications, a lot of the implications. I think what I encourage us to do instead of anything else that we've been considering is we worked, the transition board worked on 3 articles for a long time, very diligently, and had them prepared to go to this board, to then go to the attorney, and then be on the budget in 30 days. I mean, we really were moving it quickly because we felt like those are 3 really, really important, basic, fundamental issues that we wanted to have resolved. And I think that's still true. I think we did talk about the transition board talked about the representation. And there are a few different people on this board now than were on that board, but I thought we voted to not change that, or to not take up an article on representation. This board could change that as well, and there are a couple other things on the back of that sheet, the first sheet that you, divorce clause and debt and funds, and I guess that was it. But I think the three that were done are done, that were done by the transition board are done, and if everybody has a look at it and agrees, I would encourage us, even though we will suffer for the turnout, not to necessarily push for like the day after we take, the board takes over, but maybe within a few weeks. I think to wait till the school year begins, we'll run into the same issues that seem to be plaguing a lot of merged boards around the state, is that they just can't seem to get to it, particularly creating the leadership councils. And if we make it, if it's agreed by this board that that's something that really needs to happen, that is fundamental to the structure that we're going to create, then we should get that in front of the boards and get it in place and start the implementation.
Kelly?
I think in the interest of efficiency, if we, maybe not at this meeting, but maybe at the next meeting, if we are able to review what's the transitional board agreed to propose to this board, and if we were in agreement with those, I think we could send those, at least those on, to have them vetted by the attorney, so that we're not waiting for everything, and then we could at least get a portion of it.
Well, and I also hear from Brattleboro representation, I don't think we didn't agree to do anything. I just thought my understanding was that we agreed we did not have enough information to create a crisp article amendment. And so we were going to continue to work on that. And so, we got a whole summer we could work on that, people, to talk about representation. So I think it would be important to keep that conversation moving along and keep that work going. So I like the idea of sending out these articles. Can we spend money on attorneys? Do we have any right to spend any money as a board?
Frank just stepped out. Let's hope so.
We already paid them.
Yeah, that's true. We've sent him a check.
And I think the
That's right.
transition board.
The transition board did, because we were representation
Yep.
of current boards,
Yep.
so we could do that.
We've got 25.
So we've got some lawyer time spent that should get us through the month, hopefully. So, Ellen?
What are the risks? Let's say we were going to do a package where we were going to work through the representation piece and have one nice, neat package that has everything vetted for people to vote on a time where the communities could more participate, that's not in the middle of summer, which might seem, much better for the communities. What are the risks to some of the 3 articles mentioned? You just mentioned leadership councils. I know there's stuff about, grade configuration and everything. Could we not start the work of the leadership councils without that? I mean, unofficially? I guess I'm asking, is it a true risk, or is it, a risk? Not really.
We might be able to do a policy. It's the policy of this board that they exist in every school. And just
That's true.
Yeah,
let's do it that way.
Yeah.
But we followed that model because that was what was given us as the model.
In the actual fact, I don't think leadership councils would start till the new school year anyway, in reality. So, and that's the terms we're going to be for a school year, so it's probably, we could do it through policy. You're right. Sean, did you have?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion that Emily made. I reached out to John Gagnon in Guilford And he said, absolutely, we can, we want and need a leadership council. And so I was thinking, well, does the article have to be in place, just like you just said? And if you could do it some other way, establish it, and then
You could read a policy at our next meeting and second reading at the one after that.
Yeah.
Be done with it.
I think it would be nice to have it in the articles. I think it'd be nice to move forward with this. I think it'd be nice to work on the representation, but I think if there's some shortcomings or we get held up, I think we have a plan B. But I think it makes everybody feel better that there is this mechanism for community participation. I think it's a good idea no matter what, so given the current board structure, so we'll work on a date for articles. We'll move forward and send the articles that we have to the attorney for review. Is that what I'm hearing? I guess I'd like a motion about sending articles to the attorney, because that's spending money.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So we're gonna prepare, just because I'm new, so like, we're gonna prepare by sending the articles off, but it doesn't mean that just because the articles have been vetted, that we're planning for,
we haven't chosen a vote date yet.
And we haven't chosen if we'll end up making it at a time that's better for the community.
Right.
Okay. I move that we send the 3 articles that the transitional board sent to us as recommendations to an attorney to be vetted for, I don't know what, but for, I guess, legal.
For
Legal validity.
compliance to statute.
Okay, for compliance to statute.
Is there a second on Emily's?
Second.
Thank you, Ann. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to send the 3 articles for legal review to Attorney Ottinger, that's who we're using for this? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Before you take, you took a vote, I guess my question to you would have been, which I wanted to ask,
Sorry.
is you're forwarding something that not all of you, you're just taking the committee's recommendation without any of you having discussion, which I think is absolutely asinine, because you're the board. Now, that's great, the committee, and they did a lot of work, but you're the final arbiter, so you guys should be at least looking at it and say, yeah, I concur with all the hard work they did, let's send these forward. Because some of you might say, I don't totally agree with that. And by not doing that, you've just taken yourself out of the equation.
Another perspective on that. 7 of the 8 of us here were involved in 5 of us extensively.
I know that.
And 2 more pretty extensively in developing those and are really familiar with it. So it's not like an unknown.
But
We're just sitting here.
arbitrarily going, let's send this out, when all of you didn't look at it. I think, when everybody's talking about, let's move forward, make sure we're involving people, I didn't get to go to any transitional meetings, I wasn't around. There's certainly concerns that I have about things that are going to be moving forward, and would have at least liked to voice my opinion. I'm not going to have that, at least on these 3 articles, because you're moving them along. I'm just going to get to vote on them. Is there going to be any discussion here where these could be amended or changed?
We're just getting a legal review of them to make sure that we haven't said we're going to go forward with them, but with all the work that's been going on, it takes like 3 or 4 weeks to get a legal opinion on something these days.
But then you're going to end up having to send it back to them if it comes back here, and somebody says, well, Dick's got a pretty good idea, let's add that, and then doesn't it have to go back to legal again? I mean, the process could go over and over and over again. That's the point I was trying to make, is that all of you could have said, okay, yeah, we agree with this, and who's here. I mean, I'm advocating for myself because I obviously wasn't here for those meetings, and I'm sitting here and trying to get all the information I can get about what's being proposed. So Point taken.
Liz,
You wanted to
can you say your
get,
name?
most of you,
Can you just state your name?
oh, Liz Adams from Putney, most of you sitting up there were on the transition committee or were in the audience every time. Do you want to just like, what, maybe just a brief, was the school leadership councils is one of them, and school closure, blah, blah.
Do you mean you want to do a brief overview of them? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. The 3 articles are leadership, the establishment of leadership councils so that each school will have representation from parents, faculty, staff, administrators, and a board member of some fashion from here that will be keeping the communication going forth between the communities, between the schools, and this board, because there's so few of us to be able to have that direct. And that's the longest article, spells out who's on that, how the terms work for that, and what their potential list of responsibilities are. It's not an elected position per se, so you don't have, spending is more of an advisory position. The second one is grades to operate, explaining how, if there is a change in operate, say we decide to get rid of all of pre-K in all the outlying towns. We're not doing that, but say the board said, oh, we can save a ton of money doing that. The process the board would have to go through in order to approve that. Right now it says you can't make any changes for a couple of years, and the default article says you can't do any changes for a couple of years, and then it outlines how you make the changes. And so we have added our own timeline to that and our own process to how we would change grade operation. And the last one is closure of a school, and the closure of school means that you would not operate any grades, pre-K through 12, in a school, so the process by which we would do that. So those are the 3 articles. So wow, I'm getting so many Robert's Rules opportunities tonight. So I'm wondering if the board wants to make a new, we could have a motion rescission, is it, that I'm looking for? Of that vote, if people are interested in doing that, we could entertain another motion to delay sending it to the attorney.
You're fine.
For another week?
You're fine.
You're
fine with me.
Oh, you've withdrawn your rejection?
There's a way to do it. You could ask someone to withdraw the motion.
Yeah.
Someone
We already
who
voted, though. We already voted.
But you could ask, if somebody in the positive who voted yes, voted to reconsider the motion.
Thank you. Yeah.
There you go. But I don't want you to do that.
Oh.
Not on my behalf. Thank you for what you just said.
Well, I'm still asking the question, because do we want to send it off to the attorney, or do we want to wait for another meeting, hopefully get a meeting in next week where we can have everybody have had a chance to take a look at it in our capacity in this board and send it off. I don't think he's going to do anything over Memorial Day weekend with it anyway, in reality.
We just we just voted to do that, right? Yeah. So
We voted to send it now, but do we
Right.
want to vote to wait a week until after everybody's had a
No.
chance?
I don't see any reason.
Is there a motion to do that, or
Just did it.
no, is there a motion to delay it?
Oh.
I guess what would the delay accomplish? Because we wouldn't have another meeting where everybody could see it.
Okay.
But it's a good thought.
Okay. Bye, I didn't want to chair.
Christina, can I ask a question?
Yes, Jamie.
One of the recommendations that I made on the transition, Jamie Contois Putney, to this body was that there is a tremendous amount of work on our administrators right now with having all of these meetings. And so maybe it was me or maybe it was somebody else actually, and I just was like, yes, please, suggested that there be a representative or a committee of the board that would be in communication with the attorney, because one of the concerns that came that I felt on the transition board was that we were very slow in our communications with the attorney and how we were communicating, and that what questions the attorney was getting and answering, and that we weren't nimble on our feet in a way that was very time sensitive. So I just wanted to put out there that this body might figure out a way to address that in a way that's much more nimble. So I just wanted to kind of put that to the top of the list.
To me, it sounds like a good opportunity for another committee.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
I've served on boards and been in administration. I've never had individual board members contact attorneys. Is that something we direct the admin to do, or is that something that we have done as board members?
We, on the study committee, had subgroups that would contact the attorney with the superintendent, but I sat in on some of those calls just to get clarification, because often, first off, it's better to have more brains working on it.
Sure.
And it is a governance question we're working on too, so it's nice to have governance representation. So
Gotcha.
we've done that in the past, and then they would, the attorney actually had said in his opinion that having full board members or having the actual interface with the people that are making the decisions is very helpful, and like basically all his clients.
These are all
really benefit.
governance issues, though.
Governance issues, yeah, governance, I'm not
Yeah.
issues of administration, but
Right.
governance issues, like
Gotcha.
how representation works, that there's a committee here that really understands the governance, the constant proportionality issues, and I'm like, Ricky and I have been doing this now for 4 years together, so it's nice to have him in the room and just understanding what's going on and being able to speak with the attorney. So that's why we would do that. So it sounds like a good time for a subcommittee that could, I think it might be unwieldy to have this whole board and to take the time as the whole board, unless that's what the board would like to do, and try to meet with the attorney as a full board. I lean more to a subcommittee.
I'd like to, I think Tim's skills would be pretty helpful if he was available to be, you're sort of talking about an executive committee in a sense.
Yeah.
But I would like to relieve you from having to be on it. So I didn't want to just say, well, the 3 officers just do it, but the 2 officers and 1 other person might.
I wouldn't consider this really an executive committee, though, because I think it's a maybe a legal committee, because I don't think I'd prefer to think of it as a legal committee that's contacting the attorney and giving feedback to the board and making sure we're thinking through those questions. I'm happy to be on it because I feel like I've spent so long learning this stuff, I might as well be useful. So I'm happy to be on that committee. I think it's really important that we have a Brattleboro representative on that committee as well. Well, wait a minute, I'm making a committee. I'd like a motion that we make a committee to do this, I guess, sorry.
Could you give a little job description?
A committee that would be responsible for, a legal committee that would be responsible for working with the attorney to gather legal opinions and disseminate it to the board members on the articles.
Well, fools march in where angels fear to tread. That's me. So I called up Chris Leopold at the beginning of the study committee, and he was really nice the first time, and after that he said, no. It has to go through Lyle. So I sort of got the opinion that the attorney was not interested in talking to board members. Maybe it would be different if it was, set up where there are 2 more board members and the superintendent in attendance on a.
Well, I would think the superintendent would be in attendance.
Yeah.
Surely, but we cannot go and contact the attorney and start spending.
No.
You can rack up a lot of money chatting with the attorneys.
I'm not going to do that.
So the point is that this isn't a group that's been empowered to work with Lyle to speak to the attorneys. This is what was done in the past, that it wasn't, the superintendent would sit down with it was generally the chair, actually, but I prefer to have a committee doing it because the more brains on it, the better. And people have different perspectives and have different ways of asking a question. So I'd prefer to do it as a subcommittee. And that's been done for 4 years. People have been meeting with the superintendent and the attorneys talking. I suspect Lyle would prefer that too. Then she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to be the point person for that.
I volunteered to be the representative for the town of Guilford.
Okay.
I can do it too.
Okay, so
Looking for a motion to create.
but I still need a motion to create.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was waiting for that.
So moved.
So thank you for moving to create the legal committee to gather legal information and disseminate it to the board. Thank you, Bob, for making that motion. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, David, for the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of creating this legal committee to work with Lyle to gather information, legal information disseminated to the board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes have it. So members for that?
Guilford?
I'll do it.
So thank you, Tim. Sean's volunteered. I volunteered, and Dave, right?
So with 4, somebody can, or a couple people can miss and just still not, oh, it would just be one person.
Yeah, we'll need to work on warnings if we're going to have a quorum for that. Any other, so I will send to Barb the most recent copy of the articles and make sure you get it to Bob. Everybody else has it, but it will be put up on the WSESU website, so everybody can get it from there. Any other discussions about amendments?
WSESD website. isn't it?
WSES, well, there's still the WSESU website on the WSESD page, I guess, would be the way to. We're still, that's still the parent,
As long as they can find it when they
yeah.
look for us. that's-
All right, moving right along.
Christina.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Jamie.
The question that we had about the language to be put on the ballot, shouldn't that also be included to send to the
It's a good
lawyer?
idea, yeah.
I think we had made a motion on that at the last transition board meeting.
Well, we'll include that and get an opinion on that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was included with the articles.
Yeah.
I think we have to vote on it again at this meeting, because that was a recommendation from the transition board to this board, but then this board would have to approve it, I believe, before it went to the attorney.
We can ask the committee
As
to-
would all the, well, we did approve the 3 articles, is that right?
We did approve the
Yeah.
3 articles as transition
So
board.
in order to have the final passage on there, it would have to be voted on by this board.
So,
Otherwise, it's just a recommendation from the transition board.
so
What
when
was
I
our 6-4 vote for?
yeah, our 6-4 vote was to include that,
We had a 6-4 vote with a specific
Right.
motion. What, to what? With what was the
to
language?
recommend it to
To
the.
recommend it to this board
For consideration.
for consideration.
And this board just voted to send them for legal opinion before we adopt them and warn them.
That was the same vote we had on the
Oh,
articles.
I see. So
They were
not-
all, yeah.
Yeah.
So each article passed, as did that
Oh,
other wording, that
Yes.
tag on.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you.
One
Yes.
more question too. Will we be seeking, and I know that the transitional board, had a lot of questions. One reason this lawyer thing came up was because questions about representation. So is it appropriate now, because you'll be on the phone with him, to ask him questions about, so that it can inform our future discussions about representation? Because that wouldn't be one of the articles that you would be talking about. But I know there was a lot of questions, and now that you have actually a broad representation, I know, different things were under consideration. So should we move that to be included?
I would entertain that motion, sure, if somebody wanted to make
I'll
that motion.
move that we include any questions that come up regarding the article on representation be discussed with a lawyer by the subcommittee so established.
Do I have a second on that? Any discussion?
There was not a proposed draft of that, though?
No.
Sorry, who
Just a
seconded
bunch
it?
of questions.
David Scholes.
And the questions, in theory, the answers would lead to a potential draft?
Well, maybe.
Maybe, okay, all right.
I hope they're in the minutes of the transition board meeting, those questions.
We can watch the video, the BCTV video, if we've lost our way. There's a lot of questions about what you can and can't do, and he sent us a legal opinion, which just gave me more questions, and I really need to go read that whole long list, and it might behoove anybody serving on that committee to read through that case law that he so very kindly sent to us, just so we can understand what he's talking about and use our time effectively, because I want to make sure we're asking concise questions. And I'm glad we have a lawyer on board.
I'm not a lawyer in the state of Vermont.
Not a lawyer in the state of Vermont. Somebody who can read case law. Somebody who doesn't fall asleep reading case law, and then can give me the cliff notes later. That's all I'm looking for.
Sounds good.
Thanks. So, I do not do well after 9 o'clock, people, and I'm almost there. So, yes, I'm known for that, feeding at 9 o'clock. So,
You have a second.
we had a second. David Scholes seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to include questions about representation in our conversations with the legal committee and Attorney Ottinger, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes have it. So before I completely become a pumpkin, the annual meeting warning articles for June 25th.
Do you have an extra copy of that?
It looks that way.
So these were sent to Donna Russo Savage and to Lil Senning. Both thought they were fine.
I would entertain a motion to approve the warning. I'll give you a little time to read before discussion.
I lost my job. No listers.
You can keep doing the flowers, Dick.
Well, I was actually an auditor. There's no auditors, right, Frank?
Yeah, I think that it is up to this board. It's not a required position, but if the board wants to create that. Good.
So you're looking for a motion to accept the slate of articles?
Yes, I would be.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Ann. Any discussion? Jamie?
I would like to include in the opening, in parentheses, after to conduct the following business, childcare to be provided, because this is what's going to be posted in each of the sites, correct?
That should go in the morning.
There's another way to do that?
Yeah, I think it's,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's, the
Okay.
wording is pretty specified by
Okay.
statute, so I think it's better
Just
if
as long as we somehow alert folks, because that was a big deal that was made over and over. And then I believe in Article 2, if I understood how our organizational meeting worked for the transition board, it was at this meeting that we chose Barb as our clerk. Is that accurate?
Yes, this is what I talked with Will Senning about specifically.
Okay.
The moderator can start as soon as elected on June 25th. The clerk and the treasurer go through July 1st. and start on July 1st. So if there is a new clerk and a new treasurer elected at this meeting, they would start on July 1st, and Barb and Frank would continue until that time.
Till July 1st? Okay. So I would just make a recommendation for a new clerk based on some concerns that came up through the Secretary of State, and we can talk about that later. And then the only other thing is to change the Wyndham Southeast School District schools, just the sites. I didn't know, trying to change that last word of Article 4 from sites to schools. I don't know if that doesn't make sense because it's school district schools, but.
We own other property.
Oh, other property outside?
Yeah,
Oh,
including
okay.
like the district offices and.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. DeGray, you're not interested in a job?
Well, I know I have discussed this with Frank. I do believe it's important to have auditors, citizen auditors, go through and raise questions. I think it's really important. And when we're talking about more and more community involvement, I think that this is something that should be added. And I don't know if, to me, the number was 3. And this is a big budget, so there's a lot of responsibility. And, you know, I was looking to retire, but I don't want to retire. So even if I'm not there, I would certainly like to have those positions here. And as long as there are people that want to do it, then let them do it. I think they provide a valuable service to the community, well, certainly to Brattleboro, and I don't know if the other towns had auditors. But I do, I think you should add that. And you should arbitrarily come up with a number, whether that's, you know, at least 3 people.
That's the question.
Of course, yeah.
Are you thinking of this, you're talking about having the annual meeting of the district, select 3 people or a number of people to operate the way the town finance committee operates?
When the audit comes in, we were auditors for the BUHS board. And so when the audit was in, Frank would contact us in January, because there will be, you know, there was an article question to accept the auditor's report. And, you know, we'd go through it with Frank, everybody would ask their questions, and the auditors could comment at the annual meeting if they so chose to. But I think it was a valuable tool for the community to get out information. So when you go to the meeting, you say, you might be aware to look at this. So I would recommend that you add at least auditors and a minimum of 3.
And that's different than.
And the only thing you would have to do is, because, well, you don't have to, our terms were staggered. So they were 3-year terms for the auditor, and each year, at least for us, a new auditor would get elected. But you don't have to do that. You could have every year, you could have new people, or you could make the terms 3 years, and every 3 years you could have, either way that you wanted to set up the sequence. Yeah, because we had a rotating, even though I've been there for 9 years or 10 years, you know, every 3 years I had to get reelected. So.
There will be an auditor's report for this time because we don't have a budget from last year. So I would suggest that we would want to add that article next year's annual meeting, because each individual town board will still be meeting to approve their own audit.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. No, thank you, Dick. Thank you for providing that service for 9 years. I think it's really important, especially as we're a smaller board. So I think that's good advice. and I think we can wait on that till next year, till there's something to audit, unless you want a title.
No, thank you. You can retire for a year.
Any other questions about the motion? All those in favor of approving the warning of the annual meeting of the Wyndham Southeast School District for June 25th, 2019 at 7 p.m., please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Any nays? Abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it.
So we'll need one copy that you've all signed.
And we are on to other.
It doesn't have to do with that, but it does have to do with attending the meeting. Would it be I know you're gonna have childcare, but transit sometimes for people sometimes is an issue. I'm not sure what the bus schedule is at 7 o'clock at night for the current. I was wondering if there was any thoughts into one bus per town ending up at BUHS for this special vote to encourage people who maybe don't have a ride, or options for carpooling to be put out into the public, but ways for people to get to the meeting would be important to think about.
I could be the point of contact for Putney, and you could publicize my cell phone number, and people who needed a ride could call me. I've done that for elections, and no one ever calls.
But it's nice to have.
In general elections for President of the United States of America. But I would love to help transport people.
Or have options available.
Yeah.
So maybe individual boards could do some work within their boards. Maybe I could give this an assignment to sitting board members to work. Putney, you're covered.
Yeah, my sitting board as well.
But to work with your boards and find ways to offer and get it up with the postings so that people can find ways to get, because a bunch of us will be going, so I'm happy to bring somebody along to informational meetings. That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Tara. Anything else on our other business? We're going to have to schedule some meetings, but I want to make sure that the public who might not want to sit through all that fun might get their others, I believe.
The only one big other that I've got is Jamie Contois Putney, is that I had reached out to the town clerks to find out how to tabulate the results of the election. I was informed by the I was given the results from the Putney town clerk for the election. The Guilford town clerk informed me that the Secretary of Education had informed her not to give the results to the public. It was not public record. I contacted the Secretary of State and asked how that could be, because I've done election work forever and that's not my experience of checks and balances in our system. And so the Secretary of State, backed up, I believe, by the Brattleboro and Putney town clerks, all communicated that this is public record. Because there was a concern, and I guess this is being articulated by the Secretary of Education, that we are a new district and now no town should be identifiable by its votes. That all future votes starting on July 9th, which was the date that we had, or somehow had been communicated to some folks, all future elections, the votes will be picked up in each of the towns driven to Brattleboro and counted and commingled, and there will never be a future vote in the future of Wyndham Southeast School District that will be identifiable by town. And I just want to articulate a concern about that. I think it's directly contradictory to some of the articles that we're having reviewed by Attorney Ottinger, and I'm also concerned about it as an act of quite a lot of things. I mean, if you go to the Secretary of State's website, you can identify everybody by town on many things. So I'm very concerned about an affront to democratic process and public information. And I want to articulate that as something that I'd love to figure out how to address as a community. And by community, I mean all of us.
did you ask the Secretary of State about what Dan French
Liz?
said?
Liz?
Oh, so Liz Adams from Putney, did you contact the Secretary of State about what Dan French says? Because he says a lot of things that aren't right.
I do not know what Dan French says. I just know what I conveyed.
Because that doesn't sound, that doesn't.
So, we can, let's work on that at a next meeting and sort of get informed. And I think the election happened yesterday. I don't understand how an article can be, from the default articles, has to pass in all towns if the votes are commingled. So this makes no sense. And I'd like to hear from the Secretary of State on this, the Secretary of Education, and get our facts in front of us and ask them how they're going to address that particular question of how does each town vote if they're going to be picked up and driven in some way. And I think, since I know how every town voted in presidential elections, which really makes no difference because we live in Vermont with our big electoral votes, it surprises me that we can't get that. And so I hear your concern, and I think we should get our facts straight and address it at a later meeting. So
I will say my point of contact is Will Sennig, so if you follow up with anybody, you might want to talk to him.
I've heard of him. Sean?
I did get the Dummerston and the Putney tally sheet, and it is very interesting to look at, and I'm sure that Brattleboro and Guilford will also be available. Our town clerk was out today, so I'm sure those would be available.
And Guilford now has let me know that they are available as public records because of the communication from the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
So you can pick up Guilford too.
Yeah.
I did talk with Will Senning today.
Okay.
He did clarify that the instructions we were given is that the town clerks were not to publicly release, but as per state law, if a citizen called and asked for the results, they could be given out. But we were to be working under the statements in the articles that says each town clerk shall count the ballots cast in the town, shall transmit the results of the vote in that town to the elected clerk of the new union district. The district clerk shall calculate the combined votes cast by voters of the district and report the combined results to the public without differentiating as to town of residence, and that's exactly what we did.
Thank you, Lyle. I'm confident you followed the directions that were given to you by the Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's much to be figured out in this process.
Gee,
so
that's never happened.
No, it's crystalline.
Can I just make one recommendation?
Sure, Jamie.
That for the June 25th meeting, that we will identify a clerk who isn't an employee of the district so that that dynamic doesn't occur again where an employee of the directors is tabulating the vote of their future employer. If I understand that dynamic, I just was trying to figure out how you, it just seemed a little complicated to me.
No disrespect to Barb, who is fabulous.
Yes,
It's just
and
that
I
we
don't
have to make
mean-
sure that
Yeah.
that there is not an appearance of any conflict of interest
Yes.
when voting is going on. I
Yes,
think is what you're
please.
trying to say.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't mean disrespect to Barb. She's an amazing woman.
Yes.
I just am trying to create a democratic process that is outside of personalities and people.
Ricky.
Just Ricky Davidson, Brattleboro, just to jump off what Jamie just said, for the June 25th meeting, it's a floor vote from the floor, so we don't need, there's no need to change the clerk of that for that meeting. It might need to get changed for future votes that are done by Australian ballot and then commingled, I think is the heart of what you were getting at. But for the June 25th meeting, there's no need to change the clerk before June 25th, because those votes aren't votes of people who are then instructed, you know what I mean? So it doesn't get to your point.
Okay. I think I misunderstood. I thought it was a position that was held.
Well,
It's-
as Lyle said earlier, it's held until June 30th, and then it will get voted on. But it can be a way to work it out so that if the clerk
Okay.
who commingles the votes is somebody different or something.
If we really commingle votes, that's something that we still need to clarify, but if there are things that we must commingle, according to Will sending today, the Board of Civil Authority brings them to one central location, dumps them all together, and it's the Board of Civil Authority counting those votes, not the clerk. This was a special situation as dictated by the State Board of Ed. It is not the usual that the clerk would be the one.
I see.
And the clerk did not count them, the clerk tallied them.
Thank you, Lyle.
Lyle, was it the Board of Civil Authority in which town? Was it a representative from each
The Board of
BCA?
Civil Authority is the one that counts them in each town, and then this vote only reported those tallies to our clerk. And then our clerk made the tallies from each of the individual towns.
I guess in future votes, in this imaginary future vote where we're commingling and we dump the votes in and mix it all up, was the Board of Civil Authority at that point was counting?
Yes, because
And-
it has to be 2 people from each town, 2 members of Board of Civil Authority to drive the votes, the ballots to a central location, so it would be 2 from Brattleboro, 2 from Dummerston, 2 from
Okay.
Putney, 2 from Guilford that are working together to count.
Thank you for that information.
Perhaps we can change how voting occurs as one of our amendment changes. Any other business to conduct before we go through our scheduling process for our next board meeting? Ricky?
Just not to put extra work on the 8 of you, because I don't want to do that, but I think, and maybe I'm incorrect, but as of July 1st, none of the existing boards will be in effect. All policies that all the existing boards have would then also go away because those existing boards go away. So there's no policies for this board to govern the schools. So at some point, some sort of policy commingling will need to happen to create a set of policies that will govern the entire new district, because I believe as of midnight on June 30th, all the existing, and I could be incorrect on that, and that's something that might need to get checked out, all existing policies will no longer be in effect because they are tied to boards that are no longer in effect.
I think that Vernon is the only town in the SU that had different any policies that were different from all the rest of us, and that the SU policies are.
That's not
Are
correct.
everybody's.
That's not
We
correct.
will.
I'm just saying, just from the high school perspective, the BUHS has an entire set of local board policies, and many of the SU policies that came down from the SU and from the Board of Education related to that were not applicable to high school students or contradicted. Like, there was one policy relatively recently that came before us that talked about recess time. The high school doesn't have recess time, and it talked about the specific time allotments for recess. So we edited that on our board level for our board policy to get rid of the things that were not applicable for the students that which we were overseeing. So there are different policies.
Yes,
We're still going to, the WSESD will be one of 2 members of the WSESU. So all the policies that do apply to the elementary schools, obviously we're going to have to go through the ones that are different for the high school. I actually wasn't aware of that at all. I only knew Vernon had a couple of different ones, but that makes sense.
And I don't know, and when I made that suggestion, I didn't know if other towns or the elementary boards had local board policies. I just knew that the high school did, so I always kind of assumed that other boards did as well. And that was just an assumption on my part, but that's why I wanted to raise that.
We approve the SU policies at the board level because we're the board is the governor, yeah.
It sounds like it's a good agenda item for us to discuss maybe in this interim year, an extension of existing policies for boards, because I don't think we can go through the 3 readings of all those policies to adopt them. So maybe we need to find a quick way to do it, to turn it around for July 1st. So we have existing policies. I know Dummerston did some tinkering on ours, our conflict of interest, we beefed it up in our mind. So So that might be a good thing to put on the agenda item for next meeting. Thank you, Ricky, for bringing that up.
Actually, maybe an agenda item for next meeting, it would be committees that need to be established. Because it sounds like there needs to be a policy committee.
But I'm thinking that we probably
Not
do
right
need to
away.
do that, but I think it would make sense. A lot of time has gone into those policies just to approve policies as they, unless somebody has an objection to that, for us to take that up and consider it next meeting, just for 1 year, saying all the policies that were in existence continue to exist. So we can talk about that next meeting. We've got till July 1st, folks. We got tons of time on that one. And so I'm hearing another agenda item about sort of some visioning of committees. We've created a lot of committees already. Better get working on representation. So we have some more people. And what else? We have to find a date. I don't even want to do that with the 8 of us, but any other agenda items that people think are a crying need for right now to add on?
Can you help me out with this one? I talked to Lyle about this. I'm really disappointed about the voting for the representatives. I didn't vote for anybody in the outlying towns. I knew a couple of you, but I didn't vote for you because the reality is I shouldn't be voting for people in Guilford, Dummerston, and Putney. And there's a situation where if you have a race and the people in that town, they say they elected Dick DeGray in Brattleboro, and going back to your count, what was the count in Brattleboro? Well, Dick got 1,000 votes, and it was more than his competitor. That's who the people in Brattleboro wanted to represent them at the board. And then when you commingled all the other ballots, Dick DeGray lost his seat. So the people in Brattleboro didn't get the representative that they voted for because of the commingling. Now, the part that really gets me is that it's not an open election in terms of representatives, because each town gets 2. And so when you looked at the supervisory union and the voting scheme that they had, Dummerston voted for their people, Guilford voted for their people, Vernon and Brattleboro, and that system worked very well. And I believe that's a system that we should have here. Each of the 4 towns should be voting for their own representatives. They know their people. I don't know Bob. I bet he seems like a nice guy. He's been very quiet tonight. But I don't know him, so how could I vote for him? The people in the communities know the people that they want to represent them, and there's a potential that somebody could get elected that the people in a town really didn't want. And so I think that needs to be changed, and I think you really need to be judicious in that and getting that changed for the next election. I hope that's not a hard thing to do. And I don't know enough about what was the discussions, obviously, in the transition board, but the reality is each town should be voting for their own representatives, not me voting for somebody I have no idea who they are and what kind of job they're going to do. Because the way it was set up, I think you had a little form. I think I read something in the paper. But I know David, and I don't know Emily well, but I know her, and so I could cast a vote for her. I don't know Tim. I've never seen him before, and so how could I cast a vote for somebody? I have no idea who they are, what their thoughts are on education, and so I really think that's something that you should spend some time in and try to get changed. And I don't think you would get a whole lot of pushback.
Thank you, Mr. DeGray. It's actually a little harder than you think. I think those of us that sat on the study committee can tell you it's not, representation is a tricky, a lot of lawyers have been earning a lot of money in the state of Vermont advising on this. It's not straightforward, but I hear what you're saying, and it was the subject of many discussions at the study committee, and many people share your opinion. So there'll be many discussions on this coming up, I assure you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
I don't really want to go through lots of pushback, but I would be one of the pushbacks. And the one thing that I would very much encourage you all to continue to do were the forums that are BCTV ready. And when people were missing with Putney, there was an additional thing. I think that, to me, is key, Because for me, I now know all of you, including Bob, who, you know, who I didn't know all that of everyone, really knew little least about, and so actually have asked questions. And I appreciate the idea that you all represent me and my people, because I am a Putneyite. So I think that the pushback would be pretty big from me and my contingents.
Well, that's it.
Any other? Excellent. Bob's pointed out to me that we should choose a newspaper of record. Besides being a great guy, he's on top of the details, that we need to choose a newspaper of record for postings as a board, right? Anybody make a motion to?
Do we have to pick one when we make the motion?
We have to choose a newspaper of record to post in.
We usually post in the Reformer. I believe we post in the Commons. We post in all the town halls, and we also try to post at like the library and other places as well.
So you do both local papers?
I believe we do.
So
that should be the motion then.
that should be the motion then.
Yeah. And the town halls. The town.
Yeah, that's what.
So I move that.
Is there a second on the motion to approve the Reformer and the Commons as the newspaper of record, and posting will continue in town halls and schools as well, right? Yeah. Thank you for the second, Kelly. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes have it. Okay, now my favorite thing to do. We need to pick a regular date and time of our meetings. This could get ugly, people. Yes, Ricky.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I would suggest that you pick some dates and times between now and June 30th, and then maybe towards one of the ends of June meetings, pick your regular set dates and times, because then after July 1st, everyone's schedule is going to get a whole lot freer because all the individual boards won't be meeting. So I would say you select a few dates now to get some work done between now and July 1, and then schedule a regular schedule meetings going forward after that.
I think the transition board was it the first and third or second and fourth Thursdays? We were doing Thursdays with some
First and third.
First and third.
Does that work in our upcoming first
Well,
and third
the
Thursdays?
next Thursday is the 30th, so we wouldn't meet for 2 weeks if we did that,
Yeah.
which we could do or not do.
And unfortunately with June, I am very taken up with awards nights and all of that stuff. So
We have a lot of subcommittee work with the budget that needs to happen, so I'm not actually against waiting 2 weeks to meet with the board, to just have the subcommittees do their work and come back sometime before, well, we've got to work on that June 4th date if that's going to happen, but make sure we're meeting before then so we're all on the same page about the budget presentations and the information sessions that are happening. So the 30th would be I don't have a calendar.
That's next week, so if we went to June 6th.
That's after the 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, aren't we still considering the 4th as not a potential date?
Yeah, so maybe the 4th is coming up and we'll have to do,
Yeah.
but then we don't figure it out till the 6th.
Could you make a recommendation to move the June 4th one to the following week and then meet the week of June 4th for your meeting? Because I felt like you were going that way and there wasn't going to be time to do that if you didn't do it today.
Is the 11th, can that be done in Putney? I can do that one.
that's done.
It's Dummerston's meeting, but we could do it in,
Isn't it graduation?
oh, that's graduation.
Or is graduation the Thursday?
No, she moved it this year. I think she's
I'll check.
having it on a Thursday, like doing something really revolutionary in her last year of service and changing regulations.
I'll check.
So maybe we'll make that the 11th.
Just June 11th is the Career Center Awards Night. That affects,
I don't know if that would affect Lyle or anybody else, but there is an awards night that night at the Career Center.
But for a budget session, perhaps we could just have Frank at a budget information session.
yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you, Ricky. So we're tentatively looking at June 11th, depending on Dummerston's graduation.
No, it's the 13th. She moved it to Thursday.
I thought so. So in which case June 6th works for our next meeting for people? That's a question. Looking for head nodding.
I'm sorry, what?
June 6th as a meeting date, as our next meeting
I
date.
think I'll join you in July. Sorry, just not. But no days work for me.
I'll be fine, though.
Yeah, really, no days work for me. I apologize. I'll come anytime I can.
Sorry, what day was that?
So our next meeting will be the 6th of June. And that will be, where should we have that one?
I had written down.
We scheduled an extra transition board meeting for that, forgetting that we weren't going to be a transition board anymore. So we actually, already have that on my calendar for Oak Grove at 6 o'clock.
Oh, so Oak Grove then? Since they were expecting us anyway?
Well, I won't have to change this.
And then the 11th, we will meet in Dummerston for a budget information session. And then we're looking for the next meeting date with the Thursday, the 14th? Is
Are we
that
doing
Friday?
every 2 weeks, or are we doing every week?
Oh, you're right, 2 weeks, right. Sorry, I had it previous week.
The 14th is a Friday.
Right, no, that's not right. I gotta go 2 weeks, so the 20th. But you have a Putney meeting.
We don't meet on Fridays.
No, I
Okay,
meant to say Thursday.
Thursday.
Thursday the 20th, does that work for people?
That's the awards night for the high school. I don't know if that affects any of you. Maybe just me.
June 6th is a Thursday? Oh, you're right, sorry. Yeah.
If we even have one.
This Tuesday.
So is Wednesday the 19th
That's being.
possible? We don't have Brattleboro doesn't have one scheduled for that night, but if we did, it would be short.
What about June 19th? Does that work for people?
Wednesday the 19th.
Wednesday the 19th.
That's BAM's moving up night. Is that, just in case that affects anybody that has BAM's students or people that they need to see for BAM's.
Anybody? All right.
So what time and where?
Let's see, we're doing a meeting in Dummerston, we're doing one in Oak Grove, another one in Brattleboro, so it's either Guilford or Putney, I think, probably would be good.
Don't forget the high school.
Oh, we could have it at the high school.
I don't think you want to because it's BAM's.
BAM's moving up night.
You won't find parking. There's plenty of room, but there won't be any parking.
Right, so that's not a good night for that, so, Guilford.
Be nice and quiet in Guilford.
Sure.
Okay.
What time? 6:30.
6:30? Is 6:30 a good time for folks?
Yes.
6:30, that's the 19th?
The 19th and the 6th at 6:30.
No, you said 6 at 6.
The 6th at 6, I said that?
That's what you did.
That's what we had scheduled.
Oh, we had that scheduled before.
Yeah. We can move to 6:30.
I think 6:30 is a little bit easier for people, but it's up to the, 6:30? Okay.
Guilford.
Is there any chance that that one could be moved to 7, if people would be opposed? But that's just, I can make 6:30 work, but it's easier for me. The other one's fine with it, 6:30 time.
What do folks think, 7 o'clock work? Okay, we'll make that one at 7 o'clock.
Which one is that?
The June 6th will be at 7 at Oak Grove. June 11th, Tuesday, Dummerston will have a budget info session for any folks who want to attend. June 19th, which is a Wednesday, we'll meet in Guilford at 6:30.
And what is the time for the Donna Center, June 11th?
That's a good question. How about we do 6:30? And then we will have our budget meeting on June 25th.
That's the one you just warned.
The one we just warned,
That's
right.
7 o'clock.
Right, 7 o'clock.
So can I do a review?
Yes.
So we're going to be meeting, the next time we will meet will be 6 o'clock at Oak Grove on the 6th.
7 PM.
7 PM at Oak
We
Grove.
changed Oak Grove to 7, okay.
Yeah.
And then on the 11th, 6:30 at Dummerston. Then on the 18th, 6:30 in Brattleboro for a budget. And on the 19th, 7 PM at Guilford.
I had 6:30 for Guilford, but we can make it 7.
Was that-
6:30, no, that was the one at Oak Grove, was what I want to change.
Oh,
This
so-
one at
okay.
6:30 though, but I.
Oh, see, I see what
Grove
you
is
did.
7
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Guilford is 6,
Okay.
okay.
So-
What happened to the 4th that I was going to move my meeting for?
You don't need to now because it's too early for us to do a budget meeting, so we can
Okay.
get the group there, so you can,
Bye.
done, you can click that off your list. Everybody got that? Okay, I will, if anybody has additional agenda items that they think of between now and when this gets warned, you can send them off to me. Yes?
Sorry, just one clarifying question. On June 18th at 6:30 in Brattleboro, do we have a location in Brattleboro?
We don't yet.
We don't.
I can see if we can do it here. This is the biggest. Or we can do it at.
Multi-purpose, but it's hard that time of year.
Yeah, it's really hard that time of year at the
Yeah.
high school, just because there's so many things going on.
The meeting location is to be determined at our next meeting.
Cool, thank you.
Any other items under other? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Nobody can talk. So moved.
Thank you, David. Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes have it. We are adjourned at 9:37.